All right, welcome to this episode of JB&A University. On today's show, or today's class, we're talking about Christie Digital. That's right, today's show is entitled The Panel Shop. We're going to talk all about LCD panels and what's available from Christie. Now, we got a lot to cover today, and you have to get to your next class after this, so let's get the show started. As always, I'm your host, Nick Smith. I'm the VP of Technology here at JB&A, and you can catch us on YouTube if you want to catch more of our shows, or check out our JB&A University channel for more educational content. All right, let's get right into it. So we're talking about Christie LCD displays. We got a couple new products, and then a couple things, updates to existing product that you got to talk about. All right, so here, let's just kind of run through things, the agenda of the class for today. We're definitely going to do a product line overview. We're going to go over some of the new tiled products, including the sub 1 millimeter bezel. Really excited about that. And then we'll get into some of the new 98s and the Secure series and talk about discrete panels. So that's where we're running. Now let's just get right into the product line overview. Ideally, I love slides like this because it gives you a good idea of what to look for based on a client's budget, right? I mean, ideally, if somebody hits you up and says, I need a panel, but I'm looking at, low price, high performance, this gives you a nice way just to kind of look at the Christie lineup across the board and see what they have, from the Extreme series all the way up to the new sub 1 millimeter and down to the Ultra series. So good look at what Christie's doing. And when we look at the discrete lineup, of course, the previous ones were all about tiles and building walls. The discrete lineup are just flat panels for putting up in places, digital signage, conference room, boardroom applications, anywhere you need a single panel by itself or running in, solo operation. Here's where their lineup is going to sit. And one thing I would like to say is make sure you take a look at the Secure series. It's got the TAA compliance. That's important for some of you, especially in the government sector. All right, so let's talk about tiled LCD panels. Okay, a couple things to note. So the Extreme series and the Ultra series, the lineup's got a little smaller. We don't have as many SKUs now, so this is slimmed down a little bit, which is a good thing, less things to remember. But again, this is all about stacking multiple monitors together to create a video wall for different applications. And when we talk about applications, there's obviously a lot of different ways you can use, sort of multiple monitors together. On the right, video walls inside of lobbies, workspaces, anywhere where you need to get that bigger canvas, but you don't want to have to deal with projections and projection screens and the lighting issues that come with that. So, tiled LCD panels make a great solution. When we get on the left side of the screen here, where we start talking about visualization, command and control, and I think the one that's missing from this, my fault, is broadcast control rooms, right? I mean, you're going to get a chance to see where we've put ours, broadcast control rooms are a great place to put a video wall. And especially nowadays with the broadcast control rooms requiring so many sources up on the screen at once, so many different software and hardware layers. But as you can see, these are great panels for those markets. Now, I mentioned, why it matters to us. We actually have 4 of these panels in our demo center in San Rafael, California. You can see we've got our broadcast demos running through this. So our TriCasters and our Grass Valleys all push up on these walls so that we can demonstrate different workflows and different concepts for clients when they come into our demo center. In fact, here it is with all of our TriCaster gear plugged in and running up on it. So it's a great set of walls. And what I really like about this, from my team's perspective, is the way these connect together, the way I can share resources across the whole screen, and the way I can turn them on because they actually communicate together. So if I turn one panel on, it turns the other panels on. It makes it really easy for anybody to walk in the room and hit a button and get the whole wall up and running. So let's actually talk about, now this is not the panel I had. I wish I had this, but they just released it. This is Christie's new sub 1 millimeter bezel. Now when we're talking about the sub 1 millimeter, it's going to be the 2 bezels together. So when you have those seams in between, that seam in between the 2 panels is going to be sub 1 millimeter. In fact, 0.88. This is a very bright display coming in at 700 nits, which is great for these control rooms because of the fact that we can get a lot of light. It's also great for conference rooms that, in the earlier photo, we saw a lot of light coming in from one side of the building. This is spectacular for that because a very bright panel gives us a lot of light to counteract all the light coming in from other sources in the room. Native 1080, pretty standard with most of these types of panels now, and a lot of new electronics inside, right? The latest connectivity with DisplayPort and IP, so very important to look at. But most importantly, ultra thin ADA compliance depth. That's going to be very key. So if you're looking for a video wall solution in an area that is heavily trafficked and you're worried about that ADA compliance with the right mount on this, this can be done with this panel. We can jump over a little more. Now, remember I mentioned the total width of that sub-millimeter is between the two. So you've got sort of, when you look at two panels together, one side is a little wider than the other side, but together, either way, the smallest bezel is going to come in at 0.88. And that's the smallest that Christie has ever put in on these. One other thing I like on this one, they did put the op slot on this version, which gives us the ability to bring in, bright sign players directly in, as well as their own Terra receiver, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So a lot happening inside of there. The other piece that's been added to this, which is brand new for Christie, is remote power. So you've got the option of running dual power supplies, one onboard and one remote, or ditching the onboard and just going with remote power option. Couple things this does, right? It changes how much electricity you have to run to the panel, or about putting a whole lot of power behind the panels. It also allows you to completely take the heat and some of the other gear away from the wall and put it in a rack at a distance. So it's a nice solution. I think it's something that's been requested of Christie for some time. So I'm really excited that they implemented it on this version. All right, so we got some improved mechanics on these. They're a little more durable than we've seen in the past. These, they're really designed to be in heavy use environments. We've got a lot going on. And one other thing that I'm really excited about this is, the color brightness calibration. So they're actually calibrating the factories. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But if you didn't notice as you were scanning across the eye chart here was updated input connectivity and ops support. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that. So that is 4K at 60 sources. Okay, you're asking yourself right now, I've got a 1080p panel and you just told me it has a 4K input. Why does it have a 4K input? All right, well, let's talk about that. If I'm putting up a video wall and I've got four 1080p panels, right? Well, then effectively, I now have a 4K palette, right? I've got enough pixels to represent a 4K source. Well, if I have a 4K video wall, but that video wall only has a 1080p input, what do I have? Well, then we must assume that we are going to need to scale at about a quarter ratio. So every pixel is going to have to get quadrupled in order to meet the expectation of this new 4K video wall that we put up with 1080 inputs. So that's where I'm really excited that Christie threw a 4K input on this. I mean, why not input a 4K source if you have a 4K wall, which is going to reduce our pixel ratio down to a more standard 1:1 ratio, meaning our scaling aberrations and artifacts aren't going to be there. Now, look, everybody's got great scaling engines in their monitors, but think about this not just on a 1:1 ratio with a 4 monitor wall. What happens when you get to a 3x3 or a 4x4 and that wall gets bigger and bigger and bigger? That 1080p input is definitely going to suffer as it stretches across a larger palette. So if I can get myself up to a 4K input, I've got less pixel doubling there, less stretching, less aberrations going on in my image. So very excited that Christie put a 4K input on these video walls because it really allows us some greater latitude with the quality of the content that's going to go up on the screen. All right, some accessories that have come. Obviously, there's some mounting if you're going vertical or horizontal, remotes, power supplies, remote power rack. So this is your shelf to house the power supply for multiple monitors. The landscape mount, and then of course a trim kit that can be designed. Now the availability on this one, it says available TBC. Obviously this is based on the fact that we don't know how big of a wall you're going to build, so we're going to have to custom build these per the wall. No worries, either way, just know it can be done. All right, let's talk about the 65-inch 4K LCD display. Okay, so this is the one that's TAA compliant. Again, for those of you that are looking out there into the future, wanting to sell to the government environments, you want to make sure you're TAA. This is your panel. It's got a 3.7 millimeter bezel, a little bit larger than the last one, but still a great slim bezel. Still has the high brightness, but now this panel has that 4K native resolution. So we've got a massive pixel count that we can work with now, especially when you're putting 4 of these in the configuration you see on screen. You effectively have an 8K palette to work with now. You're telling me you're happy that it's not 1080p input, right? We still have the remote and redundant power supplies, and we've got that ultra thin 88 compliancy again. Great panel to look at. Couple other things, simplified setup is something I'm really excited. So again, we're talking about how it shares the content between the screens, how many cables, and as well as how we can control these, right? Turning it on, allowing each of them to take command from a primary one. So lots of options there. We do have the ability to bring in the Terra content. So now that we've got 4K coming into these panels, or we've got 4K panels, suddenly now that uncompressed Terra distribution solution is looking really smooth because we want the best image we can get on that screen. Remote power we talked about, and of course we still got that ADA requirement here that we can get with this panel and the right mount. Keep in mind, your ADA compliancy is going to be built on the mount as well. You can have a thin panel, but if you don't get it up close to the wall, it's no longer ADA compliant, and that's not the panel's fault. All right, some new product details. So here we get into some of the existing ones. We got a lot of new electronics performance built in these new processors. Lots happening in these panels. The 4K 60 built-in video wall scaling. That's what I talked about earlier about having, even though you've got 1080p panels, we still want as much scaling capabilities possible, or we want to limit the amount of scaling. And so getting a 4K input on that wall limits the amount that we can do there. We can now go up to 25 displays on the daisy chain. So remember, we're one cable into the first panel, then looping out to each of the other displays. And it's not just for the signal, it's also for control. Remember, one panel can be the master to all the others so that you only have to manage a single panel as far as powering it on, powering it off, and monitoring it. That's important because if you're running this into a Crestron or an AMX system or something of that nature, I mean, you don't want to have to run, 25 serial ports. It's not worth it. Not worth it at all. Okay, we got HDMI 2.0 ports now, very important, as well as DisplayPort 1.2. These are the newest, hottest ones. This is how we're getting, the higher resolution inputs, as well as the HDR and encrypted content in. Very awesome. Other one, quad view. So we've got the ability to do picture by picture and multiple sourcing on a single screen. So if you're building out a video wall, think about that a second. You've got the ability to split individual monitors and run multiple layers of content on that one monitor. All right, all kinds of interesting stuff happening there. Let's dive a little bit deeper in these. Ultra thin design in the Ultra and Extreme series. Again, we can get that ADA compliancy of getting that monitor as close to the wall as possible, keeping it under 4 inches so that, people aren't slamming into it as they're walking by. And we talked a little bit about the remote and redundant power, and this is, again, it's one of these features that I'm really excited about that Christie is building into these monitors. And this has been something that's been available on some of the competitors over the years, but I'm glad to see it hit these panels. But this is the ability to kind of remove the heat and points of failure away from the wall and allow us to take the power and put it in a rack elsewhere. So it really cleans up the the sort of the environment. Also saves on some electrical effort there, and having to get all the AC mounting done behind the panels, and especially in getting in the right place. So a lot of good love there on Christie. Thanks, guys. TAA compliance we hit. We have that on these panels, so we don't need to dive too much deeper on that. Okay, I mentioned this earlier, the op slot, right? Now, if you're not familiar with Phoenix, this is really important. So Phoenix is an IP encode decode platform that Christie has. And so we have the ability to drop a Phoenix module into the back of these panels. Now, where that becomes really important is know that Phoenix as a processor can handle multiple incoming IP encoded sources, right? So we can have, each panel could have a host of different sources coming into it. So you're not required to run individual HDMI cables to each panel or multiple ones. And in addition to that, you're not actually having to run a big matrix switcher in front of this, because your network switch now becomes your matrix switch. And with the Phoenix encoder spread throughout the building, your sources don't even have to be in the same room. And so the Phoenix node gives you that capability. So really like the Phoenix in an op slot version. This thing is very powerful and can do a lot. And we've built a lot of command and control rooms around this platform on other people's displays as well as Christie. So know that your Phoenix, all the good things that Phoenix has is available in a standalone, compartmentalized solution as well. So it doesn't have to be just an op slot. We talked a little bit about, the color matching early on, and how, they're actually doing it, this is the factory now, to color match in batches, so that that when you're getting these, you can get them from the same batch and ensure that they're already going to be calibrated and looking the same. So if you're putting multiple of these on the wall, you're not having to stress out over bringing in the right tools to then do the color matching. It's going to be done for you, kind of at the factory level. All right, so let's jump away from video walls and talk about the discrete panel. So listen, discrete is an interesting way of saying standalone by itself, not connected to a video wall. These have a little bit larger bezels on them because, again, we're not trying to smash a whole bunch of them in a single space and make it look like one big palette. These are just designed to be very functional panels, that are 24/7 operation for places like lobbies and conference rooms are going to get used a lot. So they come in a couple flavors, secure and access. Let's dive into those a little bit. Again, sort of the layers of these: signage, retail museums, corporate conference rooms, boardrooms. I love the idea of a war room. Does anybody have a war room anymore? I don't know. I guess maybe. If you're a big manufacturer, you might have a war room, right? Big business going to war. But again, these panels are perfect for all that. Think of these panels anytime you don't need multiple panels building a bigger palette. One panel by itself is what you have room for, then this is the right panel for you to look at. All right, so we got new high display performance or high performance displays, 98 inches. This is a beast. This is about as big as anybody's making them anymore. At this point is when if 98 inches isn't big enough for you, you're going to start looking at, doing a video wall at this point. Native resolution. These are straight out of the box, 4K. It's got the latest connectivity in it, as we can see here. But one thing that I will remind you, it's got support for 8K. Now, again, you're asking yourself, why 8K? Well, if you've got a 4K monitor, right, and you've got the ability to do quad view, which is as it comes in the next, right, we're splitting that source up. Well, you might want to have some sources coming in that are of high resolution. But either way, we're really looking at the future and to ensure that we've got the connectivity options. Because even though there isn't a lot of 8K sources right now, there's going to be soon. We know how it works. No wireless or Bluetooth in these. So keep in mind, this is the Secure series here. These have no external connectivity that is wired. These are designed to go into environments where that kind of compliancy is required, right? So no native connecting over wireless devices without adding it with an external component. So nothing happening. This is not a smart TV, folks. No internet here. Again, we're shooting for the highest image quality, future-proofed all the way up to 8K, so we can ensure your sources can see. Granted, remind you, it's not an 8K panel, it's a 4K panel, but we want to ensure that you can get whatever source it is you've got coming in, can make it up on the screen. The multi-source viewing or the quad view is one thing I really, really like. These are great for environments where you might have, multiple people simultaneously wanting to display on the screen, or video conferencing plus your local content, but you don't want to have to put in extra panels. And this gives you that ability to kind of do all that inside of a single box. Op slots are included on these as well. And as we talked about, some availability of different types of op slots, from digital signage to the Phoenix modules. All here and all ready. If we get down a little bit, we're trying to get more cost effective now and get out of a higher price panel. Here we've got same size panel, 98, but same 4K resolution. However, this time we're taking out some of the feature sets that aren't required. It's not as high brightness as the previous. The Bluetooth and wireless presentation is back. USB content is back. So this one doesn't have the same security features, but it is a more cost-effective panel for somebody who's trying to do a lot of them. But again, wants that 4K, wants a professional monitor, and this isn't something you're going to find off the shelf at your local Best Buy. All right, so a couple features that are coming in. So advanced performances here. So we talked about this earlier about getting the 8K sources in. You cannot do that on old HDMI. You actually have to have version 2.0. Version 1.4 isn't going to support it. So as we see, some of the new, when we talk about the new technology or the improved connectivity technology, it's all about HDMI 2.0 or DisplayPort 1.4. These are the new ones. Also, the op slot on this one supports a 4K 60, so that's where that Phoenix box is going to come in, bringing a 4K signal in. And this thing is future-proofed all the way up to 8K input, thanks to those HDMI and DisplayPort. Now, we talked a little bit about multi-source viewing. This is the one I was mentioning earlier. Because there is no collaboration on this panel with the wireless collaboration where we can get multiple people in, we still give you the ability to collaborate on a single screen with multiple sources, right? So as you can see, we got a couple different ways of quad split, 3 split, just a dual side by side. This is great again for a room that's got room for a single panel, but they still want to do video conferencing, maybe people plus content, or they want to have dueling presentations up on the screen at the same time. This is going to give you that ability there by utilizing different inputs and getting those up on screen. All right. Crestron connectivity. I know y'all are selling it and are putting it in. Crestron seems to be the dominating, player out there in the terms of control. So this has the module so that or it's coming soon, I should say, so that you'll be able to control this thing via your Crestron system. All right, this has been our episode for the day. I hope I kept you in the right amount of time. Any questions, as always, call us at 415-256-2800, sales at JB&A, or hit us up on the web at www.jbanda.com. Your host, Nick Smith, and I will see you in class again soon. Now go get to lunch.